How's it going, everybody? Welcome to my monthly build guides. I said they were coming, and here they are. So, some ground rules really quick, just so you guys know what I do every month with these builds. First and foremost is all the pricing I'm talking about here is in Canadian dollars. I live in Canada, Ontario specifically, so yeah, I'm going to be shopping at Canadian websites, just so you guys know. And the second thing is I am going to be using NCIX for reference for all these parts. A couple of reasons. Number one being they are price competitive for the most part. And B, if they're not, they tend to happily match competitors' pricing, generally, so that's kind of why I like to use them as a starting point. So anyway, without further ado, we'll get into our two builds. I've done two price points this month. I have a $500 budget box, and I have a $1,000 kind of sweet spot gaming rig, so let's jump into it here. So, I usually don't go for case and power supply combos, but for the 500 budget build, I did this time just to help keep the price down. So I went with the Cooler Master case. It's the Cooler Master CM Force 500. So that's a 500 watt power supply included with the case. The case looks decent, I think. It's all black. It's blacked out on the inside, which is definitely nice. My big thing with that is I was just trying to get myself a case with a USB 3 port on the front. A lot of the budget cases are still rocking two USB 2 ports, and as far as I'm concerned, that just doesn't quite cut it. So at least with this one, you get the single USB 3 on the front and two USB 2. So that gives you enough room to do whatever you need to do. For storage, no SSD in this one, although for the $68 you are going to spend on the Western Digital Caviar Blue, the 1 terabyte that I've put in here, you could also get like a 128 gig SSD, and if you got a couple extra bucks laying around, but you know, the 240s and 256s are, they're sitting about $100 right now, so if you got a couple extra bucks you can squeeze out, you can definitely get some decent storage, but you know, I was going for more capacity over speed with this because this is going to be the entry-level rig for most people. You can easily add an SSD into this later for about the same price, so you get to kind of make the choice. You can either go for capacity or speed. Next up is our motherboard. For this one, I went with Gigabyte, and it is the... Where are we here? It's an A88XM DH3, and that's the reversion 3, not the reversion 3.1. It's a $100 board. I went with this one for a couple of reasons. Number one being it gives you 4 RAM slots, so you actually have some expansion. A lot of the budget APU boards don't really have a lot of options as far as... I don't want to say the word future-proofing because I don't really like that word, but as far as options to do more things with, a lot of them only have 2 RAM slots, and you know, a lot of them don't even have a lot of SATA ports. This one's got all 6, so you definitely have some options with it, and it's for $100, you can't really go wrong. It's a good quality Gigabyte board. So next up, RAM. Now with an APU, you are definitely going to want some faster RAM. You're not going to want any of the slow 1333 or anything like that, because your GPU is built into the processor in this case, so your RAM is where it's getting all its bandwidth from. So the faster RAM you have, the happier your games will be. For this one, I've got 8 gigs. It is Corsair Vengeance Pro Black, and that is 1866 megahertz running at CL9. So you got low latency and some decent speed, and that kit is going to run you $66. So that's not too bad. That's about where you'd want to start looking for an APU to keep the performance up on the GPU built in there. Speaking of the APU itself, for this one, I ended up going with still an A10, but it's the 7700K. It's not the top end from AMD, but it's still pretty decent. It's still going to turbo up to 3.8 gigs, and you get 384 GCN cores in there, which is pretty decent, and those run at 720 megahertz. So definitely a decent performing APU. It's only $160, so that brings our total up to $495.94. So we're just about $4 under our budget. So you got enough left over to you know, grab a Timmy's, something like that. So that's what we're going to get for the $500 build. But what if I told you guys that you could actually get substantially more performance out of this for only slightly more money? Sounds crazy, right? It's not. What we're going to do, it's kind of weird. I know I said I do 2 builds, but this is kind of 2.5 one. I'm going to swap out a couple things just to show you guys what sometimes a couple extra bucks can do. So we're going to swap out the RAM and the APU itself. We're going to get still Corsair Vengeance Pro Black, still 8 gigs, but we're going to get 2400 megahertz at CL11. Because the cast latency isn't much of a big deal with dealing with the APUs. You really just want more raw speed, because the more speed is more bandwidth for that integrated GPU. So that is an extra $10. That brings the RAM up to $75. And then I swapped out the APU, swapped out the 7700K for the 7870K, which is AMD's current top-end flagship APU. It's definitely a lot faster. Instead of 3.8, it'll turbo to 4.1. And not only do you get 512 GCN cores instead of 384, but they run at 866 megahertz instead of 720. So you're going to get substantially more performance on the GPU just with that, plus you get faster RAM, and with the extra 20 bucks we had left over, I even managed to fit in a Cooler Master Hyper T2. Now, it's still not quite as good as the Hyper T12, but it's definitely better than the stock cooler included with the proc, and, you know, the APUs aren't famous for overclocking really well, but you can probably get yourself an extra 300 to 500 megahertz out of it. Between the faster RAM, the faster and more cores on the APU and the cooler, you know, you're going to get quite a bit more performance, and our total is still only $549.91. So for an extra 50 bucks, that's quite a bit more performance. So keep that in mind too. Always shop around. Sometimes a couple extra bucks can make a big difference on your rig. All right, and the last one here. This is my $1,000 sweet spot kind of middle of the road build for the beginning of the year. I really wanted to get myself into, or you guys rather, it's for you guys, but I wanted to get us into a Skylake proc for this if I could, and I did manage to do that. So let's kind of go over what I've picked out here. So for the case, we have a Corsair Carbide Spec 01. That's the one with in red. It's got some red LED fans in it. I like the case. It's a good budget case. It's 69 bucks right now. Can't really go wrong for the price. You got your USB 3 on there. Everything's blacked out. I like it. It's a good entry-level case. Power supply. EVGA 500B. So that's their 500-watt power supply. It's a 80-plus bronze. No modular or anything like that, unfortunately. But, excuse me. But for 65 bucks Canadian, that's a pretty darn good deal in these parts. So that's what I went for this build. RAM. We have 8 gigs of DDR4, of course, being Skylake, and we have two 4-gig sticks at 2400 megahertz. Cast latency CL15, but cast latency with DDR4 isn't really as big of a deal as it is with DDR3. And 9 out of 10 times anyway, the biggest thing you're going to want is more raw speed than anyway, unless you're doing something specific, at which point you probably know what you're doing and know what you need. But as a general rule, usually more speed is better for your RAM. Now, for the board, this one was a hard decision because I didn't want to overspend on it. You know, I could have gotten myself like a Z90 or Z170-A or something from Asus, and those are really nice, but those are going like 200, if not slightly more, in Canada right now. So to bring the price down a little bit, I went with an ASRock, and it was actually the Fatality B150K4 that I went with. It is a B150 chipset, which is kind of weird because that's the business class chipset, so it is missing some things that even the H series has. But they've packed a lot into this board. It's 165 bucks right now. You're getting premium grade audio capacitors. Obviously, you get lots of USB 3. I can't remember off the top of my head. It might have an M.2. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But also, the big thing for that board is me as well. Is obviously, you guys are starting to see a theme here. I've got my red case. I've got my G.Skill red Ripjaws RAM. And now I've got a Fatality board, which is, of course, red. So, kind of have a bit of a theme going here, but the big thing for me was the price point and the features this has. Like I said, you got premium audio, you got a killer NIC, lots of USB ports. I do believe it has an M.2. I have to double check. I'll make sure to let you guys know. I'll comment below and double check on that for you. But either way, like I said, it's pretty decked out for the price. I did manage to squeeze an SSD in here though, which was definitely something I wanted to do. If you're gonna spend $1,000 on a rig, in my opinion, you probably want to get an SSD. At this point, I went with an ADATA. It is the SP550. It's more of a budget SSD for them. It's 240 gig. But for 95 bucks, it's pretty hard to complain. If you need more storage, the Caviar Blue that I talked about earlier is going for 68 bucks right now, so you can easily add that in if you need it. Or grab it later when you've got a couple weeks or a couple months to save up some more pennies. For a proc, I already mentioned at Skylake, I went with an i5, but I went with pretty much the cheapest i5 I could get, seeing as how a lot of the manufacturers are starting to have the ability to unlock overclocking on the BLCK of locked Skylake chips. So we've got a i5 6400 in this. It is the lowest end i5 that you can pretty much get your hands on right now, but because we live in Canada, it's still $260, which is probably pretty ridiculous for some of you guys if you're watching in the States or other places. It's definitely more than we would like to see it at, but hey, what do you do? It's still a quad core. You get 4 actual cores. There's no hyper-threading here, but 4 cores and a turbo at 3.3 gigs. So definitely decent proc. And the nice thing with going with a Skylake build now is next year when, or this year rather, in 2016, but this year when the Kaby Lake stuff comes out later on, you could say upgrade to a Kaby Lake i7, and that would actually be a decent upgrade because, you know, you're going to get more speed and you're going to get those extra threads. So there is some sort of upgrade path here. That's one of the reasons I went with Skylake. And what else? Oh yeah, and of course video. Video is pretty important for a gaming rig. I managed to get myself a GTX 960 in this one. It's from MSI. It's the GTX 960 OC. Now, this isn't the Twin Frozer red card. I would have really liked to get that one, but it would have put me over budget by just a little bit. You can get that one. It's just, I think it's just over 300 bucks right now, but this one in particular is still very nice. It's going for 270 Canadian. You still get a dual fan cooling system. Very nice. Not an overly long card, but my big concern with this is running cool and quiet. Unfortunately, it is white, so it does kind of clash with the color a little bit. But like I said, if you're really concerned about the color, for an extra 30-40 bucks, you can grab the Twin Frozer. And that one not only looks nicer in my opinion, but also has a better quality PCB, better capacitors, all that kind of thing. You will probably be able to overclock that one further. But at the same time, the 960 is not an overly hot card, and I wouldn't worry too much about this one overheating on you anyway. Like I said, it still has a nice dual fan cooling system, so heat shouldn't really be a problem, neither should noise. And that brings our total for that build to $988.92. So we actually came in decently under with that one. So that's going to wrap it up for this month. Those are my 2 recommended, well, 2.5, I guess, recommended builds. Let me know what you guys think of this. Is this something I should continue doing? If there's something you want to see more of, or even if there's specific price points that you guys would like me to look at, if you want me to give my opinions for maybe some higher end stuff or keep it in the low end, let me know what you guys want to see. I'm going to make videos for you guys. That's why I'm here. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. And as always, thank you for watching.